Welcome to another episode of the Wood Couture podcast. We are recording live here at Wood Couture regional office in Dubai. And today we have an absolute star as a guest, defined as international designer, experienced designer, creative strategist, but above all, a great humanist. So a guy that invest in humanity, and it is the absolute pleasure that we are going to introduce you, the founder of Decanthropy, Ian Rolston. Welcome to the show, Ian.
Oh, welcome. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Amazing, very excited. I'm full of adrenaline. And for those friends that don't know you, they need to know this. A former president of the National Interior Design Association of Canada, and above all, a board member of the Black Architect and Interior Designers Association of Canada. So absolutely, 23 years of passion for the design industry, and for the various community and the humanity. And I want you to take me back to one thing. Is how did you end up studying design?
It was purely by accident. I had spent a number of months struggling in my last year of high school. My father wanted me to be an engineer and an architect, but I had challenges with math, calculus, algebra. There were just some concepts I couldn't sort of put together. And so I did everything I could. I did night school, Saturday school, I had a tutor, and I still was just struggling. And so I was having a conversation with my art teacher, and he had mentioned to me, you should apply to OCAD, which was an art school, which is an art school in Toronto. He had noticed that I had a bit of a talent in drawing and even just sort of thinking through space. And I, at the time, did not know interior design or environmental design was even a profession. So I ended up secretly skipping school for about 2 weeks, stayed in the studio and created a portfolio to apply to this specialized art school, and actually ended up getting in. And that sort of began this sort of love affair that I have with design.
You did a recent interview with Hospitality Design, and one of your answers caught my attention, but an amazing answer when they asked you whether your parents were creatives, artists or that. I said, not necessarily, but I quote, I think maybe they were creative how they approach life and survival. This answer is priceless. And why do you think they were creative with that?
Well, I imagine, my parents they immigrated from Barbados at a time when, being a visible minority or from an underrepresented group, coming to a new country was not easy. And so having to navigate a new life with a new family in a new country, you have to be pretty creative to survive. And just imagine they came from an island to a country, especially it's extremely cold in the winter. It is a completely different experience. So my parents had to jump through a lot of hoops creatively to make things work in the new place that they chose to call home.
What was the best advice they ever given you?
Well, my parents always told us very clearly that we are to, work to stand on your own two, meaning to stand on your own 2 feet. Whatever you do it to the best of your ability. Be humble. But work hard. If you're going to do something, dedicate yourself to it, and try your best to be self-sufficient, and definitely support your family.
I enjoyed reading a lot about you and your openness, and when you described going to northern China in a small village and being the only black guy they ever seen live, apart from what they see on television or Hollywood movies. And how was it, that experience?
Well, it's funny. I've always in this industry, I've been aware that there's not, at the time, there weren't many people that looked like me doing the work that I was doing. And at times you felt a little subconscious walking into a room and, not seeing anyone remotely that, looked like you or that you could relate to from a cultural standpoint. But I distinctly remember walking down the street in Jilan province and having people come out of shops and restaurants and just literally pointing at me. And I was just thinking that this has got to be a horrible feeling. That I was thinking about how celebrities feel with people gawking at them. It made me feel quite uncomfortable, but it's funny how at that time that you start thinking the world still it's a small place. And we really have to make more opportunities to connect with each other because we should know each other at this point in time. I walking in a village in northern China shouldn't have been that strange. But it really did make me feel that, yeah, we have to make new friends. We need to, from just a human perspective, we need to interact more with each other.
Then all the way to my living country, Dubai, with your Ritz-Carlton creation, the Ritz-Carlton in DIFC, in the financial center, which was when you were transiting at HBA, and the experience of people asking you to make teas and coffees, is what was that all about? I was like, what is this? Honestly.
Well, I think there's I don't want to call it a stigma, but there are some assumptions when you see in certain countries, there's an expectation that if you are Black or from African descent, you're usually in a role that's in service of people. And I think in that particular meeting, there wasn't enough awareness, I think, from the group to sort of recognize that I was here representing what is probably the largest hospitality firm in the world. So it was a little shocking for them to realize that, oh, no, when I got up and said that I would be sort of chairing the meeting and I introduced myself from Hirsch-Bedner, there was a little bit of shock. It's like, oh, like how could that be? Why are you here type of thing? But early on in my career, I humbly admit that it was challenging. There's an expectation that people think that you are not on par because there is a perception of what a designer looks like. And oftentimes I was walking into rooms where I didn't fit that description. But I think when people got an opportunity to collaborate with me, to talk to me, and to see how I approached the work, that it did instill confidence that I had the ability to address the needs within their project. And later on in my career, it became a point of almost a little bit of intrigue and fun for me, because you could recognize that there was just a little bit of a disconnect when people saw me stand up in a meeting. It's like, why is this guy talking? And then the light would go on. Oh, okay, he's from the company. So I use it as a point to engage people and then to let them know that, yeah, before we get into the work, let's just have a little bit of a conversation and get to know each other.
You have the kind of calmness, coolness, and that karma and also the very humility, because you're so humble. But when you look through your CV, you've been with the top design firm in the world. You started with two legends, and now Yabo Puschenberg. And I love when you were describing in that interview with the design, sitting around the table at the design meet with Glenn, and now to keep them engaged, to keep them excited. Wow.
It was an amazing lesson for me as a young designer. I do teach as well, and I'm always engaging with emerging professionals. And I tell them all the time that in this business, perfection is not the goal. if you are trying to obtain perfection, you are going to burn out and not be a happy individual or offer your best self to projects and problem solving with your client. I think what we have to recognize is we have a skill in listening and distilling information and responding to that. And you have to get really good at just responding. If one idea doesn't work, come up with another one. That's the magic of what we can contribute to a creative process as a designer, is that we can think things through and respond and just keep responding until something resonates. So I try to get students to understand that, part of our, if you want to call it a superpower as a designer, is to listen and respond. It's not to simply try to get your idea across, but it's to understand really what is the context of the issue that we're trying to account for, and really be thoughtful in how you go about creating a solution to meet those needs.
I want to ask you something. In your journey, professional journey, have you had a mentor or somebody that really inspired you, that you look up to? Or
yeah, there have been some key individuals that I think have shaped my design perspective, and in general, just how I approach being a professional. I think one would be Howard Farr, former president of HBA. Howard, I think for many that know Howard, was, of course, a fantastic designer, a very skillful business man, but extremely humble and thoughtful and quiet in a sense. I gleaned from him that, to be a leader, you don't always have to be the one that is the loudest, perhaps, in the room. But he had a way of recognizing talent and supporting that talent, even, perhaps when asked not to. I think he was able to see things in people and to push them and to propel them and put them in positions to be successful. And so I look up to Mr. Farr greatly. He provided a lot of opportunities for me. I've had other great leaders that challenged me from a design perspective. Sandra Kortner, of course, Glenn and George at YP. They really helped to sort of teach me the craft of design. Not just doing design, but how do you actually put and think through a design process to meet needs beyond just your own sensibilities, but to really understand what the needs of your clients are, and not just your clients, but also your team members, to make sure that you're being mindful of their needs as well.
Before and after COVID, have you developed any new habits that you didn't have before the global pandemic?
Honestly, I think being able to breathe before I jump into something. You mentioned leaders. I think I learned this also from Randa Toucan, who is just an amazing designer and leader, and who was my vice principal when I worked at HOK. My vice president. She has an ability to just sort of stop before she reacts, and she's extremely strategic. And so that skill out of the pandemic was really important to focus on what mattered, because everything was going everywhere. There was so much uncertainty. All the things that we knew, how to deliver our work, how to interact with each other, it all changed. And so to be able to take a moment to breathe and to really consider what mattered in the moment, and to focus on that, really helped to quell some of the noise and some of the uncertainty, and really, if I'm honest, some of the fear of, okay, what is really happening in this particular point in time. And so I think coming out of the pandemic, I'm much more comfortable with saying, everyone slow down for a second. Before we go running in one direction, can we just think this through for a minute? What do we really want to accomplish? And in the industry, we're sort of primed to go quickly. Everything is about sort of the transaction of ideas and dollars to drive towards a solution. And I think perhaps that may be eroding some of the value of designers within our industry. Our ability to really sort of have time to think things through has been somewhat diminished, to respond to a business metric that is all based on reduced budgets, reduced timelines. And I think in a lot of cases, those who are procuring our services are not understanding that they're not getting the best out of us. If we could just find moments to slow down at critical points in the design, the development process, to create the right strategies, that there is more value to be established within the process. So I'm a bit of on the outskirts of sort of the typical process now, trying to ensure that whenever I have an opportunity that I can speak to the fact that we have to slow down things a little bit within our industry, so that we can get back to crafting design and just not producing design. I think it's really important for the health and wellness of practitioners, but also the longevity of our industry.
The day that you decide to found Decanthropy and become a businessman, effectively, and although we all businessmen, you are a businessman even when you were working for other people, but then it is your own boat, you are the captain now. And so have you ever had the fear that being a businessman may take you away from the creative side, from designing? Because you have to take care of many aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. If I'm completely honest, that was part of the reason why I left traditional practice, because there was a hyper focus on the business aspects. And as a creative, I'm not necessarily wired that way. I definitely understand the business of design. I don't think you can be a practitioner and not be aware of the value of your efforts and how that translates to business. But I think there needs to be a balance in terms of where we are putting our efforts and our skill in developing design solutions within the process to maximize the returns from a business perspective. I think now one of my greatest, I guess, fears is that I stay too focused on driving the business and not really looking at what opportunities the business affords me as now an independent designer. We can do things a little differently that I couldn't do in a traditional practice, which I think adds a little bit of vibrancy and vitality to sort of me personally, because I don't necessarily like feeling restricted. And so while I understand the business side is really important to keep on top of, I try to balance that out to see how the business allows me to be creative and to feed my creative sort of side and to test things out that typically wouldn't be seen as acceptable within a traditional sort of framework in practicing design.
Reading your company bio, I was really drawn to a very nice quote. Fantastic, and I want to know all about this, saying going beyond human-centered design to achieve life-centered design. So how does Decanthropy achieve this extraordinary value of?
Yeah. So it's important for us to recognize that, we as human beings can be a little self-centered. We believe that, the world sort of revolves around our needs. And we're seeing that there is no other point in history, I think, that we can see the impact of our drive to growth, our drive to own and acquire things, land. it's having a really negative impact on our world. And I think some estimates report that we, as a part of this construction industry, we contribute anywhere to 40 to 45% of global waste. And so our living is having an impact on the environment that we live in. So when you think about, moving beyond human-centered, we have to consider how the choices that we're making as designers, how is it actually impacting the life around us in environments, in cultures, and in communities. I have a talk that I like to sort of share with people. It's simple fact of I love hospitality, but sometimes when a hotel shows up in a country, it does not treat the local community very well. It has a very negative impact. And so to try to design and develop even hotels and any type of architecture environment in a way that actually adds to a community is an example of life-centered design. How do we make sure that we're improving everything that's connected to that development, to that property, to that process? And so for us in Decanthropy, we are super focused on, we say that our practice is really about strategic interventions. And so for us, we're not just designing physical space, but we're looking at the systems that are assigned in context to where that space is going to sit, and what strategies are employed to develop the project. And our goal is to make all of those elements human. So we want to make the systems, we want to make the strategies, and we want to make the spaces more human. And we do this through this approach of life-centered design.
Is it more a question, you say strategic intervention, but in terms of the narrative or the values that you bring to the design, so the story you try to tell, is it more a question of preservations of the human species, of creation?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Right.
But I think preserving what is most important in each of us. We use this phrase a lot, that we need to find someone to care about. And so it's a very different approach to see the world through, how can I use this project to express care, as opposed to how can I use this project to simply as a financial sort of outcome. And don't get me wrong, I love business. I understand business is necessary. But I think sometimes we can approach business from a more human perspective. And it doesn't necessarily mean charity or just giving things away. But I do think that we could create more opportunities to collaborate and co-create in order to ensure that we are creating something better with the opportunity than we had before. Right now, we're working on a project where we're using our sort of hospitality sort of background, and we're rethinking what it is to be in community for adults with intellectual disabilities. And so it's important to understand what those intersections are in terms of the challenges that a segment of our population and within our community is almost unseen. And so I think it's important in design processes that we take the opportunity to see the breadth of humanity and use more inclusive practices, equity design principles in order to bring the community closer together. I think that is the true power of design, that it has the ability to bring human beings through human stories and human connections to experience each other in unique ways. And so I look at every environment as an opportunity to do that.
How do you make sure that the community you try to engage or connect to is part of the design process?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I have no longer any interest in me being at the center of the design process. I look at myself as a facilitator. I'm not a hero. I'm not a star. I'm not, the center of it. What I do have the ability to do is to ask questions and to engage in activities that allow people to participate in designing, because we're all designers. Design happens in every country, in every culture for millennia. We've just, in our current understanding of design, it's been constructed to support an industry, but design has happened from the dawning of time. And so I think we have to realize that even if you don't have, and I know this may be controversial, if you don't have a degree in design or you haven't gone through a 4-year program, although that is important, we still have the ability to influence the design process and to create. And so I think part of being a designer is enabling others to create and to have perspective and to share in the process and to be really transparent about the outcomes of that engagement, how it can be used or perhaps may not be relevant within the context of a certain solution. But just the opportunity to engage and to have that sort of collaborative moment, it's really about creating relationship, which in my opinion is what we need to do more within the context of design. It is about relating and responding to each other.
I got the feeling that when you talk about this engagement, the community, inside you, you have kind of a secret dream that before you hang your boots, you want to realize. I don't know why. It's a gut feeling. I don't know you. It's first time I meet you and talk to you, but the way you talk about community is like you have a secret project that you keep in your bucket list inside you that in your mind says before you hang your boots, you have to do it, Ian. What is it?
Yeah, I have a sense that we have an opportunity as designers to go beyond just producing our documents and picking finishes and finishing projects. I've loved design for a very long time, but I've had this sort of tumultuous relationship with this as well. I mean, anyone in the industry who's practicing has times where design has loved it dearly, and then design has really just beat you up. And so I would love us to really use the design to sort of have a greater impact in terms of how we see each other. And so I have a secret desire. Well, it's not secret anymore. And I want us to see and to use design differently in the world, not just, to finish a quote unquote pretty project. Don't get me wrong, I love the aesthetics, not just to drive business outcomes. I think that's great, but I think we have this untapped ability and power as designers to bring people together. And I just think if there's at any other time in history where the world needs to see themselves in each other, I think it's now. And I come from a community that is consistently marginalized, long history of challenges. And I understand what it feels like to be devalued. And I really believe that our industry has the ability through space. And we say all the time with Decanthropy that life happens in all the spaces that we create. And it's an awesome responsibility as a designer to be involved in this sense of living. And so space has the ability to augment one sense of being human. And I think that's at the heart of what we do. And I would love for our industry to focus more on those connections, on those collaborations, to make each other feel more human. And so if there is a secret that I'm driving towards, I believe it's that every interaction that we have, I want people to walk away feeling more human than they did before having an opportunity to sit and talk and collaborate.
I said to one of my friends, and again to Sarah, and I said, I'm reaching 50, and I was growing up in a very Catholic environment and colorblinded because for me, I see young, and I always said, for me, the best sentence that describe people is that I actually envy the African American community or the black community there, because you guys have, and when it's not you guys, is that I will call my attention to the definition of knowing to be devalued. And actually, I envy your community because you have such a strong brotherhood, and it's the same comparable when I go and meet friends. They are female friends. I have a daughter, so I understand the challenge of a woman, and said, "Oh, women in business," and that. And I've always said, it is not a women problem. It is a men problem, because we let those people that've got a very low IQ taking over this issue. We need to sort it out. It's not women that need to sort it out. So, and it's the same token. It is let's call it the white folks problem. It's not the black community problem. It's our problem, because we let other people see differentiation as opposed to see unity in diversity. But also highlighting the fact that there are great things in being different, because we're learning from each other. You know what I mean? And I don't want to make it a thing, because for me, I as I say, I see Ian. It doesn't really matter the rest is. But I appreciate your openness and your candid, talking, because between intelligent people, we can speak openly and enjoy and learning from each other. But I want to ask you something on the same token of subject of your community, and relating it to what they call it sustainability. I was shocked to hear from your peers in the design community worldwide that we have interviewed that everybody talk about it, but 9 out of 10 design brief barely touch that subject. So question is, hey, what's your take on it? And secondly, how damaging is for the community creation this kind of subject?
Yeah, it's a challenge in our industry, because the metrics from a business perspective aren't necessarily meeting the formulas that exist. And this is where it goes back to, again, the systems that we continue to use. We can change the way that we create our sort of strategic outcomes for business. We can rethink the way that we do development. But there are certain metrics and formulas that we use in order to hit certain targets financially when developing a process.
Yeah.
And at times, the process of applying sustainable practices, it is seen as a roadblock or an obstacle to going quickly, to meeting certain targets, to having to bring on a certain group of expertise that cost have an impact on budgets. And so there's also the challenge in manufacturing, procuring, supply chain issues. All these types of things really help to contribute to people not wanting to really engage in sustainable practices. And so I think the writing's on the wall. We can see how this is showing up in our world, in our wellness impacts, and on the environment in terms of extreme weather, all these types of things. So we have a decision to make. It's either we're going to adapt our business models to sort of fit a more sustainable practice, or we're going to continue to see the impacts of that. It's unfortunate. I still have had challenges with, we are specifying, when you're in the end process, in the interior designer, we have the ability to choose, of course, what products we're using, what fabrics, finishes, all those types of things. And still, there's still, I think, a little bit of a misunderstanding, or perhaps not a wide enough sort of library of options in terms of sustainable products that are comparable from a cost standpoint. So we create this sort of contradictory system where we say, yes, we want sustainability, but then we can't specify those sustainable material and elements at the price point that's required to meet the business needs of the project. So we're sort of running in circles and not really sort of solving the issue. And so I think there needs to be a clear systems approach to how we are procuring, manufacturing, and how we are sort of fitting our design solutions into development process that will support sustainability in a more meaningful way.
I've attended quite a few design conferences, and it was interesting. I was in Singapore last year, and one lady from the design community said that the biggest disease for the design community is pin interest. What's your take on that? What's your take on that?
So it's very interesting. It is. It's a challenge because it's for me, gathering images that's based on an algorithm that has only selected a few things to share with you, to choose from. It has some real consequences in terms of our ability as designers. So when you are no longer learning, but are just simply responding to sort of a parameter as a designer, you are not only doing yourself a disservice, but you are doing your clients a disservice. We are cultural explorers. We are supposed to be investigating and uncovering new methods, new ideas, new ways of doing things. But because of the pressure of just delivering work, we have found ways to shortchange that creative process. This goes back to what we were talking about a little earlier. We need to take more time to design. Else, you just go on Pinterest and start picking things and putting them together. And you're seeing projects now that are literally feel like they're a collection of a Pinterest board. They don't necessarily connect with the context of the space, with the culture that this place sits in. You see sort of an aesthetic that is more, I would say, Western in its development, being assigned all over the world, which at times is completely out of context. But I think we as a design community are not great on sort of course correcting ourselves. We tend to talk a lot to our own selves as designers. We award our own selves. And so sometimes we are creating a bit of an echo chamber in which we do the work. And I think that was one of the benefits of working internationally, is that you see that there's knowledge, other design knowledge in the world that has just as much value as a North American aesthetic, which is really sort of the heart of what is represented on Pinterest and some of the social media platforms. I think we need to reclaim some of this knowledge that allows us to see the world differently. We do a talk at Decanthropy where there's a professor, Dr. Michael Chi, I believe, at the University of Singapore. And they're discovering that from culture to culture, we literally see the world differently. But from our design perspective, there's sort of one sort of sensibility or aesthetic that is considered good design. And I think we need to spend more time within our design community, reframing what good looks like and what good design means. And it's not going to happen on Pinterest. It's going to be designers going out, connecting with other individuals in other countries, in other cultures, in another context, to really see and to learn how we can apply each other's approaches to design in ways that are unique and tell really fantastic stories.
5 years forward, where do you want to see Decanthropy be at that time?
So in 5 years, we want to see definitely a shift in what is important in the design process, from just the delivery of work to really the engagement of individuals, community. And so I see ourselves in 5 years having a great set of principles and processes that are reshaping the design practice. We'll do this quietly at first with some key individuals that want to see the world differently. But I see us doing this in a way that makes the process of design more human. I am not necessarily, and I used to be, I'm not concerned about awards and pretty pictures, but I do want people that we are interacting with, we want them to feel enriched by the design process and rewarded by the opportunity to know and to share in an experience that transforms how we see each other as individuals and in the context of community. I think if there's a goal for Decanthropy, it is that. Of course, we need to keep the doors open and make money and all those types of things. But I believe above all, it has to be to make the process of design a little more human.
The day that your heart will take you somewhere else, or your ambition will make you change directions, how would you be remembered in the design community?
I think I want to be remembered as a great collaborator. A great collaborator and someone that had the ability to allow you to see an issue, an item, or an idea uniquely, and someone that had the ability to inspire you to bring your complete, whole, and authentic self to the process, because there was a trust there. I do hope that those that I am collaborating with, those that I'm connecting with, understand that I do generally care about the individual first, and that the outcomes are secondary. Because I do believe that there needs to be a great deal of trust in the design process, and with your collaborators to do your best work. And I've worked in plenty of situations where trust was a challenge, and you don't really drive to the best sort of solutions. At that point, it's just work. And I think, again, this industry has so much potential. We don't have, I don't think we can rest on just producing work, because what we do is far too important. We need to ensure that we are collaborating in a manner that is extremely meaningful, and that we can produce the best outcomes that are impacting human beings and the life that's connected to human beings. I think that's our power as this industry.
So if I put a massive, giant white canvas on top, the very top of the Empire State Building, what message would you write in that?
I think it would be simply just be more human. Just be more human. And that sentiment alone can be interpreted in so many nuanced ways that would, I think, shift and change how people see each other. We need to care about each other more. It's a personal challenge for me, and I think it's a challenge that we need to, within our own circles of influence, we need to put on the table, to sort of wake up and ask yourself, how can I be more human today? How can I care a little more than I did yesterday? That someone hasn't eaten, or someone's experiencing violence, or perhaps I spoke too harshly to my colleague and I should apologize. Maybe there's something happening in their life that I could help support by, simply smiling, saying good morning, or handing them a cup of coffee, or taking them out to lunch. It doesn't have to be huge gestures, but how can we be more human? And don't get me wrong, I know we don't live in a utopia. There are real difficult challenges in the world that we have to navigate. But how can we be more human in navigating those challenges? I think is what I would write on that canvas.